各位观众朋友们，大家好，欢迎收看 JxJ 论坛，由我 Jimmy Ma 为我们讨论这个礼拜的时事。今天我们的好朋友 Jim Nowhere 在伦敦，所以他没有办法参加。我们今天很开心能够请到我们 Fort Bend County County Court of Law 第一选区第一法庭的 Judge Chris Morales 来上我们的节目。Judge, how are you?
I'm very good, Jimmy. How are you doing?
Good. You want to say hi to our audience? It's actually all over the world over satellite.
Well, hello, everybody. I want to thank Jimmy for having me on today.
Judge Morales, you are the incumbent in Fort Bend County Court at Law number 1.
Yep.
And the last 4 years now, the first term.
No, actually, it's my second term. I've been judge of County Court of Law number 1 for 8 years. I was first elected in 2014 and re-elected in 2018. And now I'm seeking my third term.
You've done a very good job in the last 8 years, since you've already won your first re-election and very highly rated on the bench. Could you tell our audience a little bit about what are the most important duties of a judge at the county court level?
Well, I'll tell you this, Jimmy. County Court of Law number 1 and all the county courts in Fort Bend are unique. We're what are called general jurisdiction courts, meaning we hear all sorts of cases. I always like to tell people I pretty much hear everything but family law cases, although I have heard one family law case in my 8 years on the bench. To be more specific, though, I hear misdemeanor cases, so criminal adult misdemeanor cases. I hear juvenile cases. Now, those can range anywhere from a simple theft all the way up to murder. I also hear civil cases with up to $250,000 in controversy. I hear probate and guardianship cases, condemnation proceedings, which another word for that are eminent domain proceedings. And then I have JP court jurisdiction appeal. And finally, I also have civil mental health commitment jurisdiction as well. And so that is where if you have a loved one who has a serious mental health issue and they're a danger to themselves or to others, you could file an application with the county attorney's office and have them committed to a mental health hospital here in Fort Bend County for up to, but not to exceed 45 days. Now, that being said, that's all the county courts in Fort Bend, but County Court of Law number 1 is unique in that it has also a misdemeanor mental health court. Now, the misdemeanor mental health court is a court designed to reduce recidivism rates among offenders with mental illness and reduce the cost on the county jail by trying to divert those offenders to already existing resources in the community, such as mental health hospitals, doctors, medication, VA hospital, you name it. We're a resource hub for them to get them to the right place to help them.
Wow, that is a lot of duties and a lot of responsibilities in not interpreting the law, but carrying out the law. As a judge, when you're on the bench, you could, I mean, you're deciding life and death of Fort Bend citizens and voters, and not just with financial matters, but for your loved ones, mental health issues and how to give them a better life. So this affects everyone's lives that lives here. See, a lot of our audience, from what I've heard, gets confused when they talk about county court at law. They get confused with county judge, which is an entirely different race. So let me be very clear. When you guys go vote, early voting will start next week. County judge and county court of law is vastly different and different responsibilities. This is not the race that KP George and Mr. Niels is in. In this race, Chris Morales says, make sure you look for county court at law number 1. That is key, to go down the ballot and make sure you look for him. Now, Judge, you know that there's a huge increase. Well, you know, your area, our area here has been one of the most diverse for a long time. But since the last 10 years, we've seen even a larger increase in Asian American voters. Could you tell us how, as a judge, you could help the Asian American community more than your predecessors?
Well, let me say this. We all want the same thing out of judges in the courthouse. First off, you want a judge who is fair, who listens to the arguments, rules based on the law. I always like to say, you look at Lady Justice. Have you ever seen that Lady Justice on the top of courthouses all across the state of Texas? She has the scales of justice in one hand, a sword in the other, but if you look closely, she's also blindfolded as well. The reason for the blindfold is because justice is blind. It's blind to skin color, it's blind to race, ethnicity, gender, it's blind to all of that. We rule, all judges should rule based on the law. And I think it doesn't matter if you're Asian, African American, Hispanic, we all want the same thing out of a judge. We want them to be fair and rule based on the law. And since I've been on the bench, my biggest thing, in fact, when I first ran for office in 2014, one of my big points that I made with the community was I was going to rule based on the law. I was going to follow the law of this state and nation. I'm not going to legislate from the bench. We hear that all the time. But seriously, there are judges out there who will try to have their own spin on the law, implement their own philosophies, implement whatever they believe into their form of justice. The legislator writes the law. As judges, we are to follow that law. If we don't like the law, then the legislator needs to change that. And you should go to your legislator and encourage them to change it if you have a problem with the laws as it's written. But as a judge, I'm here to follow it and apply it appropriately to the case.
See, for a lot of our residents, a lot of Asian Americans, some are new immigrants. Some may not be familiar. So I already said it earlier, and you said it, and let's repeat that. All are equal in front of the law, whether race, income, ethnicity. But when I say for Asian Americans, it's not to interpret the law, but what could you do in your capacity as judge to allow Asian Americans to be able to understand how the process works? For example,
sure.
Does the court allow translator or provide translator service? Is there a court liaison that could maybe do outreach, maybe let the future generation know that, hey, they see a judge, that they have a chance to learn how to become a judge and to help the community, because it is public service. It's serving the community.
Well, actually, yes. I'm going to answer a couple of those questions. We got a couple going on there. So first off, the court does provide translators free of cost. We know Fort Bend County has 100, and I believe now we're at 132 languages in our county.
Wow.
We are the most diverse county in the nation. In fact, we have what are called 15 target languages here in Fort Bend County, meaning a large percent of the population actually speaks that language, and there's 15 of them. It doesn't matter what language you speak, an interpreter will be provided to you free of cost. And it won't be some relative or other lawyer or somebody involved. It'll be a state certified interpreter that you will get free of cost. Now, I will say this, you just can't walk in and say, I need an interpreter immediately. The case would be rescheduled to allow us to get that interpreter to come in. Because in some cases, some of the unique languages that we have here in Fort Bend County, there may only be 2 or 3 in the entire state. And we have to get them to come down to Fort Bend County to provide that interpretation service. But it will be at no cost to the litigants in the case. And that service is not just to the litigants, but to the witnesses involved in that case as well. So if they're worried about the cost associated with interpretation services, they don't have to worry about that here in Fort Bend County. Now, when it comes to outreach, I am a big believer into reaching out to the community and having them come in and experience the court in a way. In fact, I put on different educational sessions every year to different youth groups. In fact, I had a group from Clements High School. It's the Clements Foundation, I believe was the name of it. At Clements, there's a large Asian population. So we had a large group of kids come in. And in fact, we had, I think it was 55 kids come in on Monday. And I told them about the Texas court system, explained the Texas court structure. I answered all sorts of questions they had about the legal field and what I do as a judge. And then we also did a tour of our juvenile detention facility and the courthouse. So I'm all about reaching out to the community, bringing them in, educating them on the court system, and just kind of opening up that veil that exists, I feel like, with the court system. We kind of hide behind these walls, and in ways I want to break those walls down, because I want the public to know what we do.
Absolutely. I applaud you, because as an immigrant myself, first of all, I actually graduated from Clements. So yes, I've been a lifelong resident. And so I would have loved to have that opportunity when I was in high school, which is a long time ago. I want to let our audience know that you have children, young children too, that you're raising, your family here in the county. I have young children, and I would love for our kids to have this opportunity too, to see it, because you're absolutely right. For a lot of immigrants coming from foreign countries, there's a reason why we would come here, because this is fair. And this is a country run on law and order. This is ruled by law, and everyone's equal. But from where we're from where our parents might come from, there, like you said, there's a veil, and there's a natural distance of being worried. Oh, if I don't speak the language, or if I get a translator, would it be at a distinct disadvantage, or which lawyer do I need to get? This county is the most diverse, so you've alleviated all of that. And you've know that Asian Americans are a part of this community, even though Asian Americans, this is purely statistics, have a lower rate of crime, okay, defendants. There is still a lot of issues that could arise being a resident. This doesn't have to be a murder. There's a lot of things that could happen to you, to a citizen, that could end up in your court, and that you've alleviated a lot of the issues or the fear of what would transpire, what the process would be. Now, I want to ask you also, if you do another event like that, I will love to have Asian American students, media to come out, visit the court, get a tour. And I didn't know there's a juvenile center, never been in trouble, but that would be a great tool to scare some of the children that needs to know that this could happen. Even though you don't see family court, you don't see children, but still it'll be great for them.
Yeah. It was funny you mentioned that. A lot of the kids, after we walked through it, they were like, I don't ever want to come here. Although they were actually impressed by the services we provide those kids who are in juvenile detention. I mean, they got to see the art room, they got to see the gym where they go and play basketball. We provide a lot of services to these kids, and they were really impressed with that, and especially how well kept the facility is as well. But I can tell you this, none of them want to go there.
No, I want the kids to know that that's not where. But when I was in graduate school, I was invited by my law class. Either way, I was able to tour a prison facility. I think it was for the city at that time. It's not in Houston, and the conditions were not what we have in Fort Bend County. Let's be honest, that we have built a very modern justice center and a very humane and clean facility, but not every county has this kind of service for their citizens. My grandfather was a judge back in his home country, and as a judge in Taiwan or Chinese is very respected, and it's a lifelong title. And for me personally, we always know how important it is to have a judge that is part of the community, and very importantly is that could grow with the county. And for you are, I would say that you are very youthful. You're one of the younger judges. You have a long future on the bench, and we want to have experienced judges. We see a lot of these turnovers, for example, in Harris County. A lot of judges get elected due to the political climate that has no experience at all. And being on the bench, experience means a lot, and be able to clear the docket means a lot. What have you done what will you do? What have you been doing to be able to process instead of having a very long wait time for trial or to resolve the cases?
Sure. So, let me give you a little bit about my background so you have an understanding of my experience, and then I want to answer that question. So, when I first started practicing law, I actually started with the Fort Bend County District Attorney's Office as a prosecutor. I was a misdemeanor and juvenile prosecutor there. After that, I went and joined what I call a medium-sized firm. There was about 40 lawyers at the firm. It's a regional firm, law firm in Houston, where I litigated cases all over the state. I traveled Rio Grande Valley, El Paso, Dallas, you name it. I was all over the place litigating cases. And then after that, I opened up my own law practice here in Richmond, Texas, and my practice centered around the county courts. So, I went through every jurisdiction that I handle earlier on in the interview, all 7 of them to be exact. And what I did with my practice was I developed it to where it worked or it centered around the county courts in each of those jurisdictions. I built on my experience and my background as a former prosecutor, where I prosecuted misdemeanor cases and juvenile cases. So those fit right in with the county courts. My litigation experience fit right in with the civil side and the probate side. And then when I was practicing, I also started practicing some condemnation law as well. So I handled every different area. Now, when I took the bench, I realized, though, that there were some issues that existed that needed to change to help speed along the process. Litigation can be very expensive. In fact, that's one of the biggest drawbacks that why people don't litigate cases is because of the sheer cost of litigation. So one thing with the civil side that I saw initially was it was taking 3, 4, and sometimes even 5 years to get a case to trial.
Wow.
That's too long. And there's one simple thing that can be done to fix that. And it's what's called a docket control order. It's an order that the judge basically institutes initially when the case is filed. And it sets deadlines of when discovery is due. It sets deadlines when motions are due, and it gives you a trial date. I took cases, civil cases, from wait times of up to 4 years down to 14 months by a simple institution, by simply implementing docket control orders. Now, in addition to that, I also implemented a separate civil trial docket. Historically, in Fort Bend County and the county courts, criminal and civil cases were mixed on trial dates. The problem with that is a criminal case will always bump a civil case. By law, if a criminal case needs to go to trial, no matter if the civil case is older, that criminal case will take precedent and go first. So civil cases were taking forever because they didn't have their own docket. Well, I basically created initially it was every 60 days. Now then it moved to every month, where I had one docket a month for just civil trials. And that really sped along that docket. In fact, that was one of the biggest complaints I received when I was running in 2014 from lawyers was it's taking too long for my case to get to trial. And I believe I changed that immediately. Some other things that I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, some other things that I did on the criminal side, on the juvenile side, we added additional dockets. In fact, when COVID hit, we're going to step back about 2 years now. I was the first court in Fort Bend County to conduct a video conferencing hearing. And during the height of the pandemic, I actually conducted 345 Zoom hearings like we're here right now. And during that's actually more than any other court in the county. And what I've done is I've added additional dockets to help move these cases along. So I have what's called a status docket. It's typically every Thursday afternoon. I've actually added some additional dates as well throughout the week. But what I'm doing with the criminal cases, I'm trying to figure out where do we stand with this case? You've been now taking 6 months to move this case along. Nothing's happened. You haven't set it for trial. It's not been set for a plea. What's going on? And then through that process, I bring the DA's office, defense attorney together. And if there's any gaps in the communication, we can fix that right then and there.
That is truly, I'm so glad to hear this. That's why I brought this up, because I know that for citizens, the key is experience which you have. You've worked on both sides of the law. You've been a prosecutor, you've been an attorney, you know where the problems are, and you know how to provide citizens here in Fort Bend County the fastest and fairest way to get through whatever legal troubles, or sometimes not troubles. Sometimes there's things that you just have to go to court to resolve. You're able to resolve it quickly and efficiently. These are quantifiable numbers. These are things that you've done that is public, and that's hence you have this sterling reputation. This is not something that you could a candidate could just promise or say they will do, because you've done it already.
Correct.
That's why we know that for this court, you are the candidate, you are the sitting judge, you're the incumbent. We would hope that our citizens will give you another 4 years to continue to implement and continue the changes you've done, the success that you've had in clearing cases and in speeding it up. Because we know that during COVID, most of the courts were shut down. I don't know for how long, but for a long time. We have friends or attorneys or judges that couldn't do anything, but you were innovative enough and a pioneer to go ahead and get it done, regardless of the situation.
Yeah. Well, actually, one of the first things when I ran in 2014, one of my promises to the voters of this county was I was going to implement technology that helped improve court efficiency and reduce cost. And when I actually came into office on January 1st of 2015, I explored different avenues to implement different technology. And one thing I did was I implemented video conferencing technology into the courtroom. Now, it wasn't the Zoom hearing like we have now where everybody is remote. It might just be one lawyer who's situated in Dallas or Austin, and they would Zoom in instead of driving down for the in-person hearing. Now, we used a different program at the time. It wasn't Zoom. It was actually called Court Call, but they could Zoom, I say Zoom, they could video conferencing in. We would conduct the hearing, and it made it very efficient for them. It reduced their cost, reduced litigation cost on their clients, saved them time. Most attorneys loved it. Now, when COVID hit, because I already had those procedures in place and some of the technology in place, all I needed to do was add a little bit more technology into the courtroom, and all I had to do was pivot, and we were off and running once the Supreme Court said we can conduct remote hearings.
That's absolutely amazing.
Court.
That's amazing. So in Chinese, we have a saying that elected officials have a duty to serve the people and to make their lives easier. In Chinese, 服务人民, 便民, make it easy for citizens to conduct a government business, and you've done that. So I wish you the best of luck at the coming up election. And at the end of every show, I remind our viewers, please go out there and vote. Early voting is next week. Election date is November 8th. Go out there and vote during the early voting process. And make sure you go down their ballot and look for Chris Morales, County Court at Law number 1. 第一号, number 1. Very easy to remember. Number 1, 第一名. Thank you, Judge Morales. It's been a pleasure, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Jimmy, for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Judge. Take care.